Okay, here we are on project number 4 then. The riveted corner seam with the lap on the inside. Final dimension should measure 4" by 4" angle, 6 inches long, plus or minus a 1/16 of an inch for accuracy with that. I'll show you how I made these first two pieces, or how I'm going to go about fabricating them. I've already taken the time off camera to lay the marks out on them, but I'll show you how I got them. So first thing I did is I went and cut my piece. I figured out my dimensions had to be 4 plus the 1/8 of an inch, or 4 1/8 in width, by 6 inches in height, given these dimensions here for piece A. For part B, I found that dimension had to be 4 inches with a 1 inch bend on it, so 5 inches in width by, again, 6 inches in height there. So I went over and I cut those two parts, and I have them here in my hands for you to view. The next thing that I did is I laid out my hole spacing. So they are measured a 1/2 inch down from the edge of the sheet, and this is basically rectangular, not taking into account this eighth inch over here, and a 1/2 inch set back. So realistically 5/8 from the edge of the piece, a 1/2 inch down. Same on the bottom, a 1/2 inch up and 5/8 from the edge of the piece, or a 1/2 inch gap between this 1/8 inch 90-degree bend, which we'll discuss in just a second. That'll take care of piece A, with the exception of the center hole, which is exactly 1/2 of 6 inches, still measured 5/8 on center off the edge of the piece, or 1/2 inch from the 90-degree bend. Then I proceeded to mark out my hole pattern on part B. So currently, part B is measured at 5 inches by 6 inches in height, the 1/2 inch down, 1/2 inch, etc., to the center of the hole with those. I believe that we need to alter this hole just slightly so it does not get in the road of this 90-degree bend. So what I recommend is just hugging with your drill the one side or the other of the hole to make certain they don't run into each other when we make that bend and we have the overlap properly. If bent at exactly a 1/2 inch, they would land right on top of each other and you wouldn't have your 90 degree. So I actually have two marks on here to accomplish this. I've got the 1/2 inch mark and the inch mark given on the screen, and I used the scratch awl to get these marks. Notice before the 5/8 mark was on there, and then I used the 1/2 inch. Over here I will do the same thing. I'll measure the 1/2 inch down and the 1/2 inch up, and then I'll take into account, we're going to use the 1/2 inch setback, but I also put one more mark on there. I used the 5/8 mark to take into account my relief so things don't get in the road of each other. And then I put my holes just on this side, the left hand side of the 1/2 inch mark, to take into account the difference. I'm sorry, the 1/2 inch mark is here, just on side of the left hand side of the 5/8 mark, to give that some relief, and you'll see that in just a second. So with that being said, let's go on to the next page here, and it's got the forming figure, or the forming pattern, in order to make that 90-degree bend. So it says bend it on the 1 inch mark and the 4 inch mark. So we'll do that now. We're going to take that over to the apron brake and we'll set that. So with that sitting in the brake, sometimes the lines can be hard to measure or hard to see. So we can actually use our tape measure and set it up that way, and we see that we're right on a 1 inch mark, and we're going to pull it up to a 90-degree angle. Remember, if you pull it too far, it'll be way past the 90. So with that, now we've got our first part. I did make a mistake there, and I did that on purpose, so you could see that it's a little more challenging to get the drill into these areas. You should drill this prior to doing it, but I wanted to show it to you to show you that it could be done after the fact, if you had to. So here we go. You can just see that I got to angle it a little more in the piece, and it's a little more challenging to work with. Maybe more challenging to work with, but it still can be done. I suppose if you transferred your marks to this other side, And had I not punched them already, I could have drilled it from this side as well. So anyway, it all worked out. Now let's go on to the other part. Let's turn the page, and if we look at it, currently we have part B complete with the holes drilled in it. Now we got to finish the 1/8 inch bend. On the 1/8 inch mark, we got to bend that up to a 90 degree to make this lap over top of it, and that was the reason for the adjustment of the holes for the relief. So before I bend it, even though it's 1/8 inch, it really won't affect anything. We're going to drill the holes. I could have just as easily drilled these after, because that 1/8 inch bend will be below the drill head. Now that I've got my holes in place, let's go ahead and take that bend. I prefer to have the small edge of the piece sticking out of the brake. That's more personal preference than anything, to get it on my mark, but it can be a little more challenging. It's a small piece, no doubt, and then sometimes when you get some older brakes, the aprons will move like that as well. So let me take a measurement and see how that looks. It appears to be on an 1/8 inch. It's hard to measure when they're that close anyway with the tape measures, but it appears that we've got an 1/8 inch, so we're going to pull it up to a 90 degree. Now that that is complete, let's take it over and see how the hole pattern lined up. Again, this should wrap over the back side, and that relief should line up our holes in the center. Had I drilled them right on the 1/2 inch, it would have been sitting not like this with a nice wrap, but it would have been sitting right on top with a gap in there with that. So let's there's a couple burrs back here. We'll just kind of knock them down a little bit with the piece, and we'll be up to putting the rivets in the part. So set them down in there, get them kind of started, and finish it with the rivet gun. Maybe I'll have to do it one piece at a time as well, being careful not to bend my fresh part up here. Now that I got it through the first one, I should be able to get it installed in the second one and close that seam and do a nice job with it. Again, I'm looking at edges, making sure the edges are perfectly lined up, as well as the tightness of the project here on the part. And then we can squeeze that off. The next thing we'll do is we'll finish the last 2 rivets, and we'll check for dimensions and see how things went. So get it started there. I may have to chase these just slightly with a drill to remove them burrs one more time, but they look pretty close, so I'm going to give it a shot. Oops. We'll get our pop rivets in there with any luck. Kind of wiggle them back and forth until they seat up just right for you. These are pretty tight, and maybe the bit's getting kind of wore. So, and then we'll, after we got our tension and everything set where it needs to be, we'll squeeze them off. In the last one, I am going to chase because I can see a burr on that. And we'll throw the last rivet in there. And squeeze that last and final with making sure our connection on the inside is tight, and you can see that pin pull in there and squeezed off. The last thing for us to do then is to turn the page, and we'll check our dimensions. So currently you can see that the edge is very snug and tight with little to no gap. This was, I mean, I can barely fit my fingernail in there, so I would say that would meet the spec of the 16th plus or minus on those. So in width, it should be 6 inches in width, 4 inches in height on both ends, which it is, and on the other end, again, 4 inches in height, and that worked out just fine. So All right, that is project number 4. Catch you on the next one.